The Moretti estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean like a fortress built for kings and monsters. 3 iron gates guarded the property. Armed security patrolled the grounds 24 hours a day. Politicians, billionaires, judges, and celebrities passed through its doors every week, all hoping to earn the favor of the man who owned it. Luca Moretti, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast. At 34 years old, Luca controlled shipping companies, luxury hotels, construction firms, and enough hidden influence to make senators answer his phone calls before their own wives. People feared him, women desired him, and neither interested him anymore. On a cold October evening, the estate glittered beneath thousands of golden lights as another lavish party unfolded inside the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Champagne flowed like water. A live orchestra played softly in the background. And surrounding Luca were some of the most beautiful women in New York. A famous actress laughed too loudly at one of his jokes. A supermodel adjusted her diamond bracelet and touched his arm. The daughter of a powerful governor spent 10 minutes trying to impress him with stories about European vacations. Luca listened politely, then looked bored. Very bored. The women noticed. They always noticed. His cold gray eyes never softened. His smile never reached his face. Nothing ever seemed to touch him. Across the ballroom, his uncle Marco watched the scene with amusement. "You know," Marco said while sipping whiskey, "most men would sell their soul for this kind of attention." Luca glanced at the women surrounding him. "I'd sell mine for 5 minutes of silence." Marco laughed. The women didn't. Because Luca wasn't joking. His life had become predictable. Business meetings, political favors, family obligations, endless parties, endless lies. Everyone wanted something from him. Money, power, protection, status. Nobody ever simply saw him. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. Without another word, Luca stood and walked away from the crowd. The women exchanged disappointed looks. Another failure, just like all the others. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the estate, Sofia Rivera was scrubbing wine stains from a marble staircase. Nobody knew her name. Nobody cared. To the wealthy guests, she was just another maid in a black uniform. Invisible, replaceable, forgettable. Sofia preferred it that way. At 23 years old, she had learned that dreams didn't pay bills. Dreams didn't buy groceries. Dreams didn't cover hospital expenses. Reality did. And reality was hard. 3 years earlier, Sofia had been accepted into one of New York's most prestigious music academies. She still remembered opening the acceptance letter. She still remembered crying with happiness. She still remembered believing her life was finally beginning. Then her father died. Everything changed. Medical debt swallowed the family. Her mother became sick. Her younger brother needed support. Music disappeared. Responsibility remained. So Sofia took the first job she could find. Then another. Then another. Until she eventually found herself working at the Moretti estate. The pay was good. The hours were terrible. But it kept food on the table. That was enough. Or at least that's what she told herself. She dipped the cleaning cloth into a bucket of warm water and continued working. Above her, laughter echoed through the mansion. Expensive laughter. The kind produced by people who had never worried about rent. Sofia ignored it. She had floors to clean. A few minutes later, another maid hurried down the staircase. "Luca Moretti is here tonight," the woman whispered excitedly. Sofia didn't look up. "Okay." The maid blinked. "Okay? That's your response." Sofia shrugged. "Should it be something else?" The woman stared at her. "He's handsome. Good for him. Rich. Also good for him. Dangerous." Sofia finally looked up. "That one's less impressive." The maid burst into laughter. "You really don't care, do you?" Sofia smiled faintly. "No." And surprisingly, she meant it. Because while everyone else spent their time obsessing over Luca Moretti, Sofia had more important concerns. Like making rent next week. Like paying her brother's school fees. Like figuring out whether there was enough food left in her refrigerator. Those problems felt more real than some mysterious mafia billionaire. The other maid shook her head and disappeared toward the ballroom. Soon Sophia was alone again. She preferred it. The silence gave her room to think. And when nobody was around,
she sang.
Very softly, barely above a whisper. Just enough to keep herself company. The melody drifted through the empty hallway. Gentle.
Sad.
Beautiful. It was an old song her father used to sing while cooking dinner. A song she hadn't performed for anyone in years. As the notes escaped her lips, something inside her loosened. The exhaustion. The stress. The constant pressure. For a few precious moments, she wasn't a maid. She wasn't drowning in responsibilities. She wasn't surviving. She was simply Sophia. A girl who loved music. A girl who still dreamed despite everything. Down the corridor, a security guard paused. He listened for a second, then smiled. Even the walls seemed softer when she sang. Unaware of any audience, Sophia continued cleaning. The song flowed naturally, like breathing, like remembering who she used to be. Outside, dark storm clouds gathered above the ocean. Lightning flashed across the horizon. The wind began rattling the estate windows. Far away in the ballroom, Luca Moretti stood near a massive glass wall overlooking the sea. He watched the approaching storm. Something restless stirred inside him, a feeling he couldn't name. The first drop of rain struck the glass. Then another, then hundreds. Within minutes, the storm unleashed itself upon the coast. Thunder rolled across the sky. Guests glanced nervously toward the windows. The orchestra continued playing. The party continued. But somewhere deep inside the enormous mansion, a forgotten maid quietly sang while cleaning a staircase. And neither she nor Luca Moretti knew that before the night ended, everything was about to change. Rain hammered against the massive windows of the Moretti estate. The storm had arrived with a vengeance. Thunder rolled across the Atlantic like distant artillery fire, rattling crystal glasses and vibrating through the marble floors beneath the guests' feet. Inside the ballroom, however, nobody seemed concerned. The wealthy rarely worried about storms. Storms happened to other people, not them. A famous singer stood on stage performing a slow jazz number while waiters moved through the crowd carrying silver trays loaded with champagne. Politicians laughed. Businessmen made secret deals. Socialites competed for attention. And Luca Moretti was bored out of his mind. Again. He stood near the grand staircase, one hand resting in his pocket, staring blankly into his whiskey. Across the room, a brunette model was trying desperately to catch his attention. He pretended not to notice. Nearby, Marco smirked. You know she's been staring at you for 20 minutes. Luca took a sip of his drink. Maybe she'll stop. Marco laughed. You're impossible. Luca didn't respond, because the truth was simple. Beauty no longer impressed him. He had seen too much, done too much, lost too much. Perfect faces blurred together after a while. Everyone wore masks. Everyone wanted something. Nobody was real. A loud crack of thunder shook the estate. Several guests jumped. The orchestra stumbled briefly before continuing. Outside, rain lashed violently against the glass walls. Lightning illuminated the ocean below. For a brief moment, the dark waves looked like liquid silver. Then everything went black. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Women screamed. Someone dropped a glass. The orchestra stopped playing. Emergency lights failed to activate. Complete darkness swallowed the mansion. What the hell happened? Someone shouted. The generator. Get security. My phone doesn't have signal. Luca remained perfectly still. Years in the underworld had trained him to stay calm when everyone else panicked. His eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. Around him, frightened voices echoed through the room. Security guards immediately moved into position. Somewhere nearby, Marco cursed. And then, Luca heard it. A voice.
Soft. Clear.
Beautiful. At first, he thought he imagined it. The melody floated through the darkness, so gently it seemed impossible. The crowd gradually fell silent. One by one. Conversation stopped. Movement stopped. Even the storm outside seemed distant. The voice continued. A haunting melody unlike anything Luca had heard before. There was no performance. No microphone. No audience. Just a woman singing. And somehow that made it even more powerful. The song carried something raw. Something real. Not polished. Not manufactured. Not performed for attention. It sounded honest. Painfully honest. Luca felt something tighten in his chest. For years, music had been background noise. Another luxury. Another decoration. Now it felt different. The voice wrapped itself around old wounds he had spent years burying. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. His mother singing while cooking dinner. The small apartment where he'd grown up. The days before violence became normal. The days before power consumed everything. The days before he became Luca Moretti. The song ended. The silence afterward felt enormous. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then the emergency generators finally activated. Lights flickered. Dim golden illumination returned to the estate. Guests blinked and looked around. The spell was broken. Almost immediately, conversations resumed. People laughed nervously. They blamed the storm. They blamed the power grid. They blamed anything except what had really happened. Luca scanned the room, searching, looking for the woman who had been singing. Nothing. No singer. No performer. No obvious source. Just confused guests and irritated security guards. Marco approached. You okay? Luca ignored the question. Who was singing? Marco frowned. Singing? The woman. What woman? The voice. Marco looked around the ballroom. You mean the music before the lights came back? Luca nodded. His uncle shrugged. No idea. For reasons he couldn't explain, disappointment settled heavily in Luca's chest. The feeling annoyed him. He wasn't supposed to care.
It was just a song.
Yet he couldn't stop thinking about it. Meanwhile, 2 floors above the ballroom, Sofia Rivera was helping calm a frightened little girl. The child had become separated from her parents during the blackout. So Sofia had done the only thing she knew.
She sang.
The same song her father used to sing. The same song she always sang when someone needed comfort. The little girl had stopped crying almost immediately. Now her parents were thanking Sofia repeatedly. You have a beautiful voice, the mother said. Sofia smiled awkwardly. Thank you. You should be a singer. The words hit harder than they should have. For a moment, old dreams resurfaced. Then reality crushed them again. She shook her head. I'm just a maid. The woman looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she smiled sadly and walked away with her daughter. Sofia returned to work. She never saw the man standing at the end of the hallway, watching. Luca Moretti. He had followed the direction of the voice through half the mansion. And now he stood motionless, 20 feet away, observing. The maid didn't notice him. She was busy collecting broken candles and cleaning debris left behind by the blackout. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. No designer dress. No expensive jewelry. No perfect makeup. Just a tired young woman carrying a box of supplies. Yet somehow, Luca couldn't look away. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous. Not threatening. Just unfamiliar. For the first time in years, he was curious about someone. Genuinely curious. Sofia finally turned around. Their eyes met. Only for a second. Then she immediately looked away and continued working. No nervous smile. No flirting. No attempt to impress him. Nothing. It was almost shocking. Every woman in New York seemed desperate for his attention. This one barely acknowledged his existence. A strange feeling settled in his chest. The beginning of an obsession. Downstairs, the party slowly returned to normal. Guests resumed drinking. Politicians resumed lying. Businessmen resumed negotiating. But Luca Moretti remained standing in the hallway, watching a maid disappear around a corner. And for the first time in years, the most powerful man in the city found himself wanting to know someone's name. The next morning, the Moretti estate woke beneath a sky washed clean by rain. Servants moved through the mansion, carrying trays of breakfast. Security teams changed shifts. Gardeners trimmed hedges damaged by the storm. Everything appeared normal. But Luca Moretti hadn't slept. Not even for a minute. He sat alone in his private office overlooking the ocean, staring at the dark water below. A half-finished glass of whiskey rested untouched beside him. Normally, after a long event, he would review business reports, answer calls from overseas partners, or meet with his advisors. Today, he couldn't focus on any of it. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the voice again.
Soft.
Melancholic. Beautiful.
Real.
For the first time in years, something had broken through the thick walls surrounding his heart, and he hated not understanding why. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." The door opened. Marco entered carrying a tablet. "You look terrible." "I didn't ask." "You also didn't sleep." Luca leaned back in his chair. "Did you find her?" Marco sighed. "I knew that's why you called me at 7 in the morning." Luca remained silent. That was answer enough. Marco dropped into the chair opposite him. "You realize this is ridiculous, right? Find her." It was one song. Luca's gray eyes lifted.
Cold.
Dangerous. Marco immediately raised both hands. "Okay,
Fine.
we're looking." A few hours later, the entire estate staff was confused, because security had begun asking strange questions. Who was singing during the blackout? Did anyone hear a woman singing? Did anyone know where the voice came from? Nobody understood why. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed Luca was searching for a famous singer who had attended the gala. Others believed one of the guests had embarrassed themselves somehow. Nobody guessed the truth. Meanwhile, Sofia Rivera was completely unaware of the chaos she had created. She was standing in the massive estate kitchen peeling potatoes. An unglamorous task, but one she had performed hundreds of times before. The kitchen smelled of garlic, rosemary, fresh bread, and industrial-strength cleaning products. A radio played softly in the background. One of the cooks glanced at her. "Hey, Sofia." She looked up. "Yeah, you sing, right?" Her knife paused. "Sometimes." The cook shrugged. "Security is asking questions." Sofia frowned. "What kind of questions?" "Something about the blackout." A strange feeling settled in her stomach.
Why?
"No idea." The cook returned to chopping vegetables. Sofia tried to ignore it, but unease followed her for the rest of the day. By late afternoon, the answer finally arrived. A security guard approached while she was organizing fresh linens. "Miss Rivera?" She turned. "Yes. The boss would like to see you." The world seemed to stop. For a second, Sofia thought she had misheard him. "The boss." The guard nodded. "Mr. Moretti." Every drop of color drained from her face. Her first thought was simple. "I'm fired." Her second thought was worse. "Maybe I broke something." By the time she reached the private office wing, her stomach felt sick. Nobody got summoned by Luca Moretti. At least not ordinary employees. The guard stopped outside a pair of massive wooden doors. "Go in." Then he left.
Just like that.
Sofia stood frozen. She considered running. Briefly. Very briefly. Then she took a deep breath and knocked. A calm voice answered. "Enter." She pushed the door open. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean. Bookshelves lined the walls. Dark wood furniture filled the room. And standing near the windows was Luca Moretti himself. Without the crowds. Without the bodyguards. Without the expensive party atmosphere. He somehow looked even more intimidating. He turned toward her. Their eyes met. Sofia immediately understood why people feared him. There was something dangerous behind those gray eyes. Something controlled. Something sharp, yet strangely tired. The silence stretched. Finally, Lucas spoke. "Were you the one singing during the blackout?" No greeting. No introduction. Straight to the point. Sofia blinked. Of all the questions she expected, that wasn't one of them. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Lucas studied her face carefully, as if searching for something. "What was the song?" "My father's favorite." Another silence. "What is your name?" "Sofia Rivera." The name seemed to settle somewhere inside him. Sofia Rivera. He repeated it mentally. For reasons he couldn't explain. He liked how it sounded. Luca walked toward his desk. "Sing it again." Sofia stared.
What?
"The song." Her heart nearly stopped. "Mr. Moretti, I don't think." Please. The word surprised both of them. Luca rarely said please. Ever. Sophia noticed it too. She looked genuinely confused. But after a long pause, she nodded slowly. Okay. The office suddenly felt very quiet. Sophia clasped her hands together,
Took a breath.
and began to sing. The same melody, the same lyrics, the same emotion. The first note hit the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Luca froze. Again. The world seemed to fade away. The ocean, the office, the city. Everything disappeared. Only the voice remained. It wasn't technically perfect. Professional singers had stronger voices, more training, more polish. But none of them sounded like this. None of them made him feel this. The song ended. Silence followed. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Finally, Sophia looked down awkwardly. Was that okay? Lucas stared at her for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. A real smile.
Small. Rare.
Genuine. The kind nobody in the city ever saw. And somehow that smile startled Sophia more than his reputation. It was beautiful, he said quietly. Something fluttered strangely inside her chest. She looked away first. Outside the windows, waves crashed against the cliffs below. Inside the office, something had begun. Neither of them understood it yet. But for the first time in years, Luca Moretti wasn't thinking about money, or power, or enemies. He was thinking about a maid with a beautiful voice. And Sofia Rivera was beginning to realize that the most feared man in New York wasn't exactly who the world believed him to be. Neither knew it yet, but both of their lives had just changed forever. After that day, something inside Luca Moretti changed. It wasn't obvious at first. The city still feared him. His rivals still avoided his territory. His businesses still generated millions. From the outside, he looked exactly the same. But inside, something was different. For the first time in years, Luca found himself looking forward to tomorrow. And that terrified him. Because the reason had a name. Sofia Rivera. 3 days after their meeting in his office, Luca found himself walking through the estate gardens at sunset. The sky burned orange above the ocean. Waves crashed against the cliffs below. And sitting near a greenhouse, completely unaware she was being watched, was Sophia. She was reading a book. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. Just reading. Luca stood still for a moment, watching. Most women became different around him. They laughed harder, smiled wider, acted prettier, acted smarter, acted richer. Sophia did none of those things. She remained exactly the same person whether he was present or not. And somehow that fascinated him. Finally, he approached. Sophia looked up. Surprise flashed across her face. Mr. Moretti. Luca sat on a nearby stone bench. You can call me Luca. Sophia almost laughed. Nobody called him Luca. Not politicians. Not business partners. Not even most family members. Yet, he was offering the privilege to a maid. Okay, she said carefully. Luca. A strange warmth settled in his chest. He liked hearing his name from her. Far more than he should have. For several moments they simply sat together, listening to the waves, watching the sunset, enjoying the rare comfort of silence. Then Sophia spoke. You don't seem happy. Luca looked at her. Most people were too afraid to ask questions like that. Sophia wasn't. Why would you say that? She shrugged. Because everyone around you is trying to impress you. And people who have everything usually aren't looking for more. Lucas stared at the ocean. The answer hit closer than she realized. Money wasn't the problem. Power wasn't the problem. Loneliness was. But admitting that felt impossible. Instead, he changed the subject. You wanted to be a singer. Sophia smiled sadly. Wanted. Past tense. Life happened. The smile disappeared. Luca noticed. His jaw tightened. He hated hearing regret in her voice. What happened? Sophia hesitated, then told him everything. Her father, the medical bills, the academy, the dreams she buried, the sacrifices she made. Luca listened quietly. When she finished, neither spoke for a while. Finally, he asked, Do you still sing? Only when nobody's listening. I listen. The words escaped before he could stop them. Sophia blinked. Luca rarely sounded vulnerable. Yet he did now. The realization left both of them strangely unsettled. Over the following weeks, they spent more time together. Not intentionally. At least that's what they told themselves. Luca somehow kept finding reasons to be wherever Sophia happened to be. The greenhouse, the gardens, the library, the kitchens, the ocean terrace. Everywhere. The staff noticed. The security guards noticed. Marco definitely noticed. One evening he cornered Luca in his office. "You've got a problem." Luca didn't look up from his paperwork. "I have many problems."
No.
Marco sat down. "You have one problem." Luca sighed. "What?" "The maid." Silence. Marco smirked. "Thought so. Be careful." Luca finally looked up. "About what?" "You're starting to care." The words landed like a punch. Because they were true. Luca cared. Far more than he should. Far more than was safe. And, unfortunately, other people were beginning to notice too. Across the city, rumors spread. The feared Mafia boss had become interested in a maid.
People laughed. People mocked.
People gossiped. But Luca didn't care. What worried him was something else. His enemies. Because, in his world, the moment someone became important to you, they became a target. And somewhere in the shadows of New York, dangerous men were already paying attention. Men who understood exactly how to hurt Luca Moretti. Not through bullets. Not through business. Through Sophia. And none of them knew the storm that was coming. The attempted kidnapping changed everything. Not just for Sophia. Not just for Luca. For the entire city. Because news traveled fast in New York's criminal underworld. Especially when it involved Luca Moretti. Within 24 hours, every Mafia family, gang leader, and black market broker knew the same thing. The feared king of the Moretti syndicate had a weakness. A maid named Sofia Rivera. And weaknesses were dangerous. For the first time in years, Luca increased security around someone other than himself. 2 bodyguards followed Sofia everywhere. A security vehicle waited outside her apartment. Additional guards patrolled the Moretti estate. Sofia hated it. "I feel like a prisoner," she complained one evening. They were standing on a private balcony overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting. The sky glowed orange and gold. Below them, waves crashed against the cliffs. Luca leaned against the railing. "You were almost kidnapped." "I know. You could have been killed." Sofia crossed her arms. "But I wasn't." His jaw tightened. The memory still haunted him. The thought of arriving 30 seconds later. The thought of losing her. It was enough to make his blood run cold. "You don't understand," Luca said quietly. Sofia studied his face. For once, he looked vulnerable. Not powerful. Not dangerous. Just afraid. And somehow that scared her more than his anger ever could. "What don't I understand?" she asked softly. Luca looked out toward the ocean. His suit jacket was gone. His tie loosened. His face exhausted. Yet the moment he heard her voice, everything softened. Slowly, he walked across the room, stopping beside the piano. Listening. Just listening. When the song ended, neither spoke. Finally, Luca looked at her. His eyes were tired. Honest. Human. For several moments, he said nothing. Then he finally spoke. "You matter to me." The words hung between them. Simple. Honest. Devastating. Sophia's heartbeat quickened. Luca rarely revealed emotions. When he did, every word carried weight. "I know," she whispered.
No.
He turned toward her. "You don't." For the first time since she met him, Luca Moretti looked completely exposed. The walls were gone. The mask was gone. Only the man remained. "When my father was murdered," he said quietly, "I learned something." Sophia listened carefully. "The people you love become targets." His voice dropped lower. "So I stopped loving people." Pain flashed briefly across his face. "I convinced myself it was easier." The confession hit Sophia harder than she expected. Suddenly she understood. The loneliness, the distance, the coldness. None of it existed because Luca lacked a heart. It existed because he had spent years protecting it. Then she arrived and ruined everything. A sad smile touched her lips. You sound angry about that. Luca laughed softly. A real laugh, rare and warm. I am. For a moment they simply looked at each other. The ocean breeze moved through Sophia's hair. The fading sunlight painted gold across her face. And Luca realized he was completely, hopelessly lost. The realization should have terrified him. Instead it felt like peace. Then suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the air. Everything changed. Luca reacted instantly. Years of training took over. He grabbed Sophia and pulled her down behind a stone wall. Another shot cracked through the evening. Glass exploded somewhere behind them. Security alarms erupted across the estate. Men shouted. Footsteps thundered. Sophia's heart nearly stopped. What was that? A sniper. Luca's voice became ice. Pure ice. The old Luca had returned. The dangerous one. The killer. The king. Moretti's security flooded the balcony within seconds. Weapons drawn. Scanning every rooftop and hillside. One guard rushed over. Boss. Luca looked up. What? The guard handed him a small envelope. It was attached to the bullet. The world seemed to stop. Slowly, Luca opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. 5 words. Stay away from the girl. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Luca's expression never changed, which somehow made it worse. Because everyone around him knew what that expression meant. Someone was about to die. The guard swallowed nervously. Boss. Luca folded the note. Very carefully. Very calmly. Then he looked toward the distant city skyline. His gray eyes had become terrifyingly cold. They fired at her. Silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Luca slipped the note into his pocket. They fired at her, he repeated. The word sounded like a death sentence. The guards exchanged nervous glances. Because they knew what came next. War. Not business. Not negotiations. War. Meanwhile, Sophia watched him closely. For the first time, she truly understood the power he possessed. Entire organizations feared this man. Entire criminal empires avoided conflict with him. And now someone had crossed a line. A dangerous line. Hours later, deep inside Manhattan, a meeting took place. Representatives from 3 rival syndicates gathered inside a private nightclub. They were discussing business when the doors exploded open. Luca Moretti entered. Alone. The room instantly fell silent. No one smiled. No one spoke. Fear spread through the room like poison. One of the crime bosses finally cleared his throat. Luca. Luca walked forward slowly. His face was expressionless, which was never a good sign. He stopped in the center of the room, then placed the bullet on the table. The metallic sound echoed through the silence. Someone shot at Sophia. Nobody answered. Nobody breathed. Luca's gaze swept across the room. Cold. Lethal. Unforgiving. If it was one of yours, he said quietly, you have until sunrise to hand them over. The threat lingered in the air. Heavy. Absolute. And if we don't? One man asked carefully. Luca smiled. The room immediately became colder. Because everyone present understood one thing. Luca Moretti smiling during moments like this was never a good sign. Then I'll assume you're protecting them. The smile disappeared. And God won't be able to help you. Nobody challenged him. Nobody argued. Because they knew he meant every word. Back at the estate, Sophia stood alone in the music room. Unable to sleep. Unable to think. The events of the evening replayed endlessly inside her mind. The kidnapping. The confession. The sniper. The threat. Everything was spiraling out of control. She walked toward the grand piano near the window. Sat down. And began to sing. Softly. The same song. The same melody. The same voice. A few moments later, the door opened. Luca entered. You know what's funny? Sophia smiled slightly. What? I spent years building an empire. His voice was barely above a whisper. Yet the only thing I truly care about is sitting in a room and listening to you sing. Tears filled Sophia's eyes. Not sadness. Something deeper. Something warmer. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. Luca looked down, then intertwined his fingers with hers. For the first time, neither pulled away. Outside, the city prepared for war. Inside, two hearts finally stopped running from the truth. And somewhere deep down, Luca Moretti understood something that terrified him. He could survive losing money. He could survive losing power. He could survive losing his empire. But he could never survive losing Sofia Rivera. And that realization changed everything. The room immediately became colder, because everyone present understood one thing. Luca Moretti smiling during moments like this was never a good sign. Then I'll assume you're protecting them. The smile disappeared. And God won't be able to help you. Nobody challenged him. Nobody argued, because they knew he meant every word. Back at the estate, Sofia stood alone in the music room, unable to sleep, unable to think. The events of the evening replayed endlessly inside her mind. The kidnapping, the confession, the sniper, the threat. Everything was spiraling out of control. She walked toward the grand piano near the window,
Sat down.
and began to sing, softly, the same song, the same melody, the same voice. A few moments later, the door opened. Luca entered. You know what's funny? Sofia smiled slightly. What? I spent years building an empire. His voice was barely above a whisper. Yet the only thing I truly care about is sitting in a room and listening to you sing. Tears filled Sofia's eyes. Not sadness. Something deeper. Something warmer. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. Luca looked down, then intertwined his fingers with hers. For the first time, neither pulled away. Outside, the city prepared for war. Inside, two hearts finally stopped running from the truth. And somewhere deep down, Luca Moretti understood something that terrified him. He could survive losing money. He could survive losing power. He could survive losing his empire. But he could never survive losing Sofia Rivera. And that realization changed everything.